This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And the topic for today, I think, is a perfect fit, especially as some of us are going back to work now that our kids are going back to school, and the theme is choose best effort or the best you can be. Sounds almost the same to me, Candace.
Yeah, but where do you think they may be different?
Well, at the moment, it may be my best effort on what I'm working on. But overall, being the best that I can be, not judging myself if the effort I put in doesn't give me complete results.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So, and besides work, where might that show up?
Say that again.
Besides work, where might that show up?
Oh, it can show up anywhere. So I'll give you an example. Up until last Friday, I had been seeing a hairdresser that I just didn't like what she did with my hair. I'd come home after spending a lot of money looking no different than I did when I walked in there. And so I finally switched hairdressers and just felt so good in the salon with the person, and especially when I walked out. And I was like, I gave it and my best effort to move away from where I was. And I think I really needed to do that because I walked out feeling like I was walking on a cloud. And only thing that happened was, to really reshape my hair and put a few highlights in it, but to the point that it sort of transformed me from the inside out. That I didn't keep going back to doing the same old thing. And I just needed a boost to make me the best that I could be.
Yeah, so we do not talk about these ahead of time. We do not collaborate. Right. So this is very spot on. So first of all, the one of the key points is that there is a distinction between the two things. So our best effort, we can continue to put in our effort up to our abilities and our skills, but we may not have abilities and skills beyond that. Okay.
Right.
And the authors of The One Thing delve into in chapter 16. And I've read the book before and I was rereading it. It's like so much left behind that I hadn't certainly incorporated personally, but just, embedded in my brain. But the other part is it the best that can be done? So is it the best that we can be individually? And so that requires what? And you evidenced it. You went out and you searched for other solutions.
Exactly.
Okay. And so that's somebody, that's the difference between somebody who's like pushing, trying to do it, a little engine that could or couldn't, I can't remember.
Right.
And, but, just couldn't until the mindset changed and switched to something that opened up the vista of what's possible. So it all happens between the ears in a nutshell. So thinking about that now, what kind of fork in the road choices might show up in other areas or the same area or whatever?
So what I've noticed since Friday is I have more confidence in the respect that give an example. So I posted a picture of myself on Facebook and sent it to a bunch of friends. And I had one friend who responded, "Oh, it doesn't look like you did anything different." And in the past, that would have just hurt. It'd have been like, "You're my friend. Why would you say that?" But I saw this opportunity of, you know what? That's okay. We don't have to think the same. We don't have to like the same things. And I don't have to be hurt by somebody's words. And I think when we can start getting stronger about that, we can see other opportunities in front of us rather than get stalled and stop there and go, "Oh, well, how do I get this person to agree with me or be on my side?" Because that's not going to necessarily make us any better.
Or the alternative is, how do I maintain a relationship when I don't feel this person's on board for me, or all of those things, because
Right.
it has the risk of severing a relationship. Now, sometimes that may be a good choice, sometimes that may not be a good choice, but the point is there's choice there. And rather than being the victim of our circumstances, so to speak, that phrase, the circumstance itself isn't the thing that necessarily creates the problem. It's the thinking about the circumstance that can cause the problem. And, easy for me to say with, the fires in Maui, but, looking back on the fires, I mean, all that devastation and so on, but there can be glimmers of way to put it in perspective and not be a blot that continues to destroy the life going forward.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, whether it's a devastation like that or a friend of mine got her first ticket ever the other day. She thought she was going through a yellow light, but the policeman said she went through a red light. And she was ready to give up driving. I mean, that's what she kept saying. "I'm going to give up driving. I guess I'm too old." And my comment was, well, maybe this ticket just tells you that maybe you have to be a little more aware.
Mhm.
And also, can't you look at it as like, wow, I've been driving for 50 some odd years, and this is my first ticket. Okay, make it your first and your last. And as we talked about it, I could hear in her voice that, wow, I never thought of looking at it that way.
Mhm, mhm.
And this podcast and some other things that I've changed in my life. I won't say that I'm always positive, because I don't think anybody can do that 24/7. But I think if you can look at like you said, the circumstances and say, okay, how can I improve this? And, devastation from a tornado or a fire or an earthquake, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be totally up to you. You're going to need support, but you got to take that first step.
Really great. Yeah, it's just that we have resources that we can avail ourselves of, and then make those choices. So it's a whole chain reaction. And we can think back to other episodes that where we didn't necessarily have a great coping approach that may have stymied us, and then make some decisions there. The thing I really love, I mean, I love this book. I love it. And, I gained a lot when I first read it. And I tend to, books that I like a lot, I tend to outline. And even then, I forgot a lot of stuff in the first iteration. But going back through it, there was one person, I need to capture his name, but he wrote about the good enough plateau, the okay plateau. And so there are some things, you can hear that and say, oh, should we push to be the best we can be, the best it can be on everything? Or is best effort good enough, the current skills and so on? So what are your thoughts?
But it's funny when I was growing up in school, they had home ec, and my mother was so pleased with me, because when it came to cooking and baking and cleaning, I got all high marks, but I had to make a dress. I can't believe we had to make a dress, but anyways, I had to make a dress, and my mother was a seamstress. But I didn't get any of my talent from her. And I made this dress, and it was horrible. One arm was longer than the other, and the stitching was bad. And the teacher called my mother in, and she said, "I'm very concerned about Karen. We know that she flunked typing her first time she took it. And now look at what she sewed." And my mother looked at me, and the first thing she said to me was that the best you could do? And my answer to her was, with the assistance I was getting, yes, because I really didn't know what I was doing.
Mhm.
And my mother said to the teacher, "Did she ask for help?" And the teacher said, "Well, yes, she did, but they were supposed to follow the directions, and most of the other students did." And my mother said to me, "Did you follow the directions?" I said, "They were hard to read." And with that, my mother said, "I think we're going to go get an eye appointment." And it was that I couldn't read the print correctly. And so, not being able to read the print correctly, I got frustrated, and I just did what I thought I should do. And I came up with this horrible dress. So, looking back, I can say that was my best effort at that time,
Mhm.
even though it went into the garbage.
Well, and as a young person, it wouldn't have been necessarily in your arsenal of things to do to be able to explore other options. You know, now
Right.
we can go on the internet and so on, but what do we know at that age and in that, era? And it should have been the school system's approach. We had a young woman, we used to hire some kids through a high school work study program, and we had somebody in our file room, and all of our files were numerically filed, not by client name. And so she was a lovely young woman, and we started noticing files being misfiled. And she would bring a file in. Vic would, buzz her on the intercom. This is like going way back.
Yeah.
And bring me file such and such, and she'd bring it in, and it was the wrong file. And then one day he said very unartfully, "What's wrong with you? You have something wrong with your eyes?" It was like sometimes not very sensitive. And she said, "Well, when I was young, they told me I had dyslexia, but I don't have it anymore." And then we realized, oh, this is the problem. Well, then this is, when I was really high on my horse in terms of advocacy. And I called the school system and I said, "Why would you put her in the business track in the vocational training? Why wouldn't you put her in something that didn't require numbers?" Well, there was this whole backstory. Her father was dyslexic and he was embarrassed by it. He didn't want her to be stigmatized and so on. But the point of the story is, if they had had the wherewithal, if there had been some mechanism of wherewithal, I think the responsibility was with the guidance counselor at school to find out, her skill set was
Right.
X, and what she needed for the best she could be was X plus Y. Fast forward about, I'm going to say 10 to 12 months later, I get a call from another employer asking for a reference. And he said, "I just want to ask," she's been working for us. And he said, "I just want to ask you a question. Did you have any problems with her? Da, 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 da." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, she works the cash register and we're short all of the time." He said, "I'm not accusing her of taking money, but blah, 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 blah." All right. And I said, has she explained anything to you? And so anyway, I called her and I said, "You need to tell them that you have dyslexia, because why these were the worst jobs she could be in because of her condition, her
Right.
situation, when other paths would have been available to her." So what's the lesson we can take for ourselves in the conversation today?
Well, I think first of all, we have to start identifying what are the things that we can do well, and where do we struggle. And it took me a long time to figure that out for myself. I mean, I thought I knew it, but in the career paths that I was going, they wanted me to do the things that I wasn't as skilled at. And for many years, I never told people that I wasn't skilled. It was like, oh, I'm going to learn this along the way.
Mhm.
And in some ways that worked for me, but there were other ways that, it was a disaster. And in my last corporate job, I didn't want people to know that I was wearing hearing aids. And when I would sit in a room and I couldn't pick up everything everybody was saying, I was too embarrassed to admit that. And that was part of my downfall, and then once I admitted it, it was like, oh, well, look at some of these mistakes you've been making. Why didn't you tell us before?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I can remember my very first job interview when I came to Cleveland. I had been a lifeguard, through high school and, summers and late high school, all through college. And I had never had a job that had office systems. So anyway, I came to Cleveland. I had gone to paralegal school. I didn't have the confidence to go to law school. It wasn't even on my radar. And I came to Cleveland, and I, did well in my paralegal studies. And I was sent out for job interviews in one firm. They had this very officious woman who met me, came to the reception room and said, come with me, very stern. And she handed me a piece of paper and she pointed to a typewriter, an electric typewriter, and said, type this, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Well, I had never used an electric typewriter before. I'd only used the manual ones at that point.
Right.
And even then, sparingly, we didn't have a lot of that, in college, certainly, but it wasn't like it was a career of
Right.
typing papers. So I could not find the on button for the darn typewriter. It was nowhere to be found. So here I am panicking and so on. And she comes in. I never did find it. She comes in and I explain the problem. She's like, is upset with me. She reaches behind and under the machine and turns it on. Why would an on button be there?
Right.
Okay. So she takes me, she gives me another not even 5 minutes, another few minutes. She comes back, rips the thing out of the typewriter, tells me to follow her. We go into the lawyer's office, this big, massive office and so on. And she hands him the sheet and he looks at me and he says, a monkey can type better than this. So that interview didn't go well. But the point of the story is this, that I am a perseverer and I loved my job as a paralegal. I just devoured everything I could. I got a job with a firm that had very little supervision in many ways. So I had to learn a lot on my own and figured out ways to do that. So ultimately, I was getting burned out there and I was leaving, and I created my own independent paralegal business that I worked on a contract basis for law firms, many of whom the people who had worked at that firm. And that original firm with the on button or the whatever,
Yep.
the hidden on button, they were one of my bigger clients. So, and it's not like I had any, vengeance about it and so on. It was just that, I hadn't fully evolved, et cetera. But it could have had limiting impact on me, going forward, depending on how I chose to take that path.
Sure.
So what the authors are talking about is we can make the distinction, one, catch the distinction, just is that this best effort that I'm putting in, am I limiting myself, or is it the best whatever it is I'm approaching can it be done better? Can I do it better? Can I be my best? And then we make the choice. And the choice is this something I want to put my best it can be effort into, or is this an okay plateau? Because the point of the book, the one thing is we have to choose the priority that's consistent, that aligns with our purpose, the thing we're trying to achieve, and then allocate our focus, our time, and our efforts to pursuing that, and the rest of it is in, kind of in the blurred part of the Zoom meeting, for instance, there's a blurred background. So where in your life are some of those things going to show up?
Well, some of them have shown up actually in my coaching. And I'm very open with clients when I do a one session to get to know them, no charge, make sure that there's a good fit. And the few that I've had to tell that this is not a good fit, and I explain why, most people are very understanding, and especially if I can give them a referral to somebody else. But I had a woman right in the beginning, and I was telling her why I didn't think I was a good fit. And at the end of my explanation, she said, you shouldn't have told me that, because now I have no confidence in you. And I said, well, in those areas, you probably shouldn't have any confidence in me. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I would not be good to guide you forward in those areas. And she said, well, that means you're not a good coach. And I said, in certain areas, I'm a very good coach, but I can't coach on every aspect of life. And I only learned that truthfully through podcasting and podcasting this show and talking to other coaches and understanding that, you have to use what you are most comfortable in to feel successful.
Yeah, and I have a friend who her primary focus is coaching young adults, so not teens, but people who are, of age.
Mm-hmm.
And so in their 20s up to 40, because the definition of young adults has expanded, and it's their needs and wants and so on is an acquired skill in terms of understanding the motivations and the resistance and all the limiting beliefs that exist and the ennui that exists in their life. So yeah, it's interesting. So it, what you described is such a great example of just exploring, just noticing that fork in the road, that there is a fork in the road. So what lesson or what action do you think that we could encourage listeners to take, if any?
I think it begins with truthfully being honest with ourselves. So what I mean by that is maybe you understand what your best skills are, but it doesn't mean that those other skills can't be honed if you want them to be. And so, and I've done this in the past without thinking about it. It's like, wow, that's something I really would like to be able to do better. And whether it's taking a course or reading more about it or practicing it more, we have those opportunities. And sometimes we get stuck and we say, well, this is what I do best, so I'm just going to have to stick with this for the rest of my life. And maybe you aren't doing it at your best. So it's being honest and open about the opportunities out there.
Yeah, if I can add to that, another element can be, we have finite time. Everybody has 168 hours a week, and some of it is spent, sleeping and eating and, doing the essentials of life, of surviving, physically surviving, and then, our personal relationships and so on. So when we are pursuing, say, career or other types of goals or objectives, we have to curate. We have to decide which things are going to support that and which things are going to distract from it. And so I know there was a time when I thought I needed to be on top of everything. Right. And it was exhausting and it was impossible and, very self-defeating and so on. I still have those little phantom things that pop up from time to time. And I have to say, stop that. But the point is to be able to make that, I'm going to call it an informed decision in terms, and this is what the authors are talking about, the title of their book, the one thing that if they do it, their phrase is that if they do this one thing now, it'll make things that follow easier or unnecessary to do. So it's not everything, it's what's the one thing right now that will further this particular objective of mine. So I think being able to see where it requires best effort versus the best it can be, or the best we can be.
That's interesting because my husband is in IT, and for years, anything that would come up, he would just say, yes, he could do it. And he figured out a way to do it. And he just kept adding more and more to his plate. This past year, he's taken a full-time job, and he's very, very specific in what he's doing for this company. And I was having problems with a computer program, and I asked him to help me. And he looked at me and he said, 10 years ago, I would have done it. I would have put all my energy into it. I would have figured it out, and, it would be complete. He said, I don't want to do that anymore. He said, it's not that I can't do it. He said, but it's just going to take up so much of my time and energy that either, you're going to not be happy with the results, even if they're positive. And he was right. Okay. Because I remember that from the past. And so it was like, you're right, because there are things that he'll ask me to do that maybe I would have jumped at, when we first got married, and say, oh yeah, I got to do this to make you happy. And now it's like, no, that's not on my radar. And that's okay.
Well, and you've articulated it in other episodes in our conversations in terms of putting some limits on what other people want you to do, either in the podcasting business, hosting, and even among family members, and how, it takes a lot off of our plates where, it's not designed for the best outcome for the other person as well as for ourselves. So
Exactly.
it's curating and editing and working on the one thing that we can do right now, this moment. So,
Well, another good podcast. Keep me focused on what I do best. And I hope our listeners are gaining some insight and making their days just a little bit easier and more fulfilled.
that's our wish. Thank
Have
you.
a good day. Take care now.